How does the blind man find his faith in the morning? When his two eyes can't see the prominent evidence of what two hands once felt, how does he find his faith? Because I can look through the holes in his hands to see the destruction of my sin, caused before he was hung up to cover up the decay, like a master painting hiding the cracks, ruining the wall. But these broken walls are still standing, held up by the wooden beams carried on his back to form a cross, like the X that marks the spot, because he knew what would be found when beauty came from his pain. So how does the blind man believe what he can't detect with his eyes, when his senses only render him senseless? How does he control the confusion? We already battle between what we can see is real and what we feel through interpretation. So how does the blind man find his faith in the morning when he opens his eyes and he's still consumed by the darkness? How does he find the light? How does a deaf man hear the Lord's calling? Because God speaks and he strains his ears to listen, but doesn't hear. His stubbornness is unintentional, and yet most of us listen and hear, but still don't act upon our instructions. We claim to be deaf because it's easier than being obedient. So how does the deaf man hear and understand when the silence is so loud to him? And God can speak in different ways, and he can listen with the keenness of his heart and the logic of his mind. But what is logical and what is love? And can you see them in a miracle? When God speaks to you, do you listen or question based on what you deem to be logical? How do the paralyzed dance for the Lord? When we can't fly with open wounds and broken wings, we're all flightless birds, left walking, waiting for healing. Within ourselves, our soul is screaming, but our body is lame. But in seeing how much faith they had, Jesus said to the paralyzed man, "My son, your sins are forgiven." And yet we are able-bodied and still unable to praise. And the paralyzed man is able to dance even when his faith was small, because his soul kept reaching. And how do the mute sing the Lord's praises when he's already shackled up so tight in his own problems? His chains are left unbroken because of his words that are unspoken. They're just silent confessions of a sinner who's too weak to open his mouth and speak. But even when my lungs are filled and my mouth wide open, my praises aren't heard over the shouts of the mute. And I believed, therefore I spoke, but I am greatly afflicted. My faith was born out of salvation, the judgment of a nation, where in the hierarchy of sin I am the murderer, and my hands are stained with the blood of the Lamb who was slain so I'd be saved. I am the thief, my heart sick with grief because of the get out of jail free card I happened to stumble on when I was given life. I am the sinner whose selfish ways were saved on that day of Calvary, nailed to the cross that bridged the gap so I could cross over troubled waters. So don't judge me based on my past. There's a reason why it's behind me. These crossroads always leading to the cross, bridges for me to cross. And this is more than what's literal, this is spiritual. The work of the Lord who said to him, "Who gives man his mouth? Who makes him deaf or dumb? Who gives him sight or makes him blind? It is I, the Lord, and it is through them that faith is found from miracles." Thank you.
Cause them to rise far beyond maximum. No.
The only words left to ask goes because you were the only person with the key to my heart.
Son? That don't make sense.